Good evening, wherever you are right now. Perhaps in the noisy traffic, perhaps in the safe silence of your home, I want you to disconnect for a moment from the blinding light of your screens, from the endless barrage of social media notifications. Thank you for being here with me tonight in this silence. History. What comes to mind when we hear that word? Usually noise, right? The metallic clatter of massive armies crossing borders, the sound of jets tearing through the sky, signatures on marble in capitals, flashing cameras, handshakes. History books are in love with these great moments. They record them, they glorify them, they sanctify them. We were taught that this is history, but I don't believe it. At least I don't anymore. I believe that the real turning points in history do not occur amid that noise. On the contrary, they occur in places where no one looks, in a deep and frightening silence. The fate of an empire is sometimes drawn not on the maps of generals, but on a kitchen table. Sometimes in that void when a mother lifts the lid of a pot and looks inside. Sometimes in a supermarket aisle lit by cold white lights. Sometimes in the indescribable, indelible helplessness that appears in a father's eyes when he says no to his child's simple request. I want to describe a scene to you. Everything I will tell you tonight is hidden in this single frame. Please close your eyes. I want you to picture this in your mind like a movie scene. Try to see the details. We are in the very heart of Moscow. It is late 2024. From the outside, Moscow is still the proud imperial capital we know. Red Square is sparkling, expensive cars flow down the streets, and the shop windows still try to imitate the glamour of the West. But when we turn our camera away from that glamour and focus on an ordinary gray supermarket in a side street, the mask falls. We go inside. You hear the faint hum of fluorescent lights. We slip between the shelves. We see a man, an ordinary citizen. His face bears that characteristic weathered weariness of Russia. Perhaps a retired teacher, perhaps an engineer who once worked in a factory. He wears an old coat with frayed lapels. He looks around. Not like a criminal, no. More like a man whose pride has been wounded. There is fear in his eyes, yes. Fear of being caught. But behind that fear lies a much heavier, more oppressive feeling, one that weighs heavily on the chest. Compulsion and deep shame. Do you know what this man is doing? With trembling, veiny hands, he takes something from the shelf, and he's stashing it in his coat over his heart, as if it were a state secret, as if it were a priceless diamond, a piece of the royal treasury. What is it? A bottle of vodka? No. Expensive caviar? No. A packet of butter. Yes, you heard right. Just a simple 250-gram packet of butter wrapped in yellow foil. In the 21st century, in the capital of a superpower that sends rockets into space and threatens the world with nuclear missiles, a citizen is forced to steal the butter he will spread on his bread. Because that butter is no longer food, it is a fortune. Now, freeze that image. Keep that expression on that man's face, that helplessness in your mind like a photograph. And now let's fast forward a little. I want to take you from those artificially glittering streets of Moscow, thousands of kilometers away, eastward, to that boundless, unforgiving Siberian landscape. The calendar reads November 15th, 2025. Location, Yakutsk. You know Yakutsk, or you think you do. We remember it from geography lessons as the coldest city in the world, where thermometers read -50, where your breath freezes and crystallizes in the air. But Yakutsk is not just ice, my friends. It is Russia's treasure chest. 90% of Russia's famous diamonds, gold, uranium, the endless wealth that finances that vast empire that feeds Putin's war machine, comes from those very lands, from beneath the feet of those people. But today, on that freezing November morning in 2025, there is no luxury on those streets. No diamond sparkle. Picture this scene in your mind. Frozen, black mud on the ground. Buildings are gray and neglected. And in the middle of that freezing wind, that bone-chilling cold, people are waiting in line. What are they waiting for? A new phone? No. Fresh steak or a hot meal? No. To get frozen meat chunks, regardless of quality, just to get some protein. Those people, standing right on top of the world's largest diamond reserves, right on top of that wealth, their faces frozen stiff from the cold and despair, waiting for hours, just for a frozen, bony piece of meat. These two scenes, that honorable man in Moscow, hiding butter in his coat like a thief, And those crowds in Yakutsk, waiting hungry above the diamond mines. The story I want to tell you tonight is the story of the invisible link between these two scenes. On one side, the fairy tale of great, strong, indestructible Russia that Vladimir Putin has been telling us for years on television, in his confident, authoritative voice. On the other side, this cruel, stark reality where a packet of butter becomes a luxury jewel. The chasm between these two worlds truly astonishes me. I'll even admit it keeps me awake at night. I can't help but ask, how can a state, a superpower with nuclear codes, end up unable to feed its own people? How does the most comprehensive, insidious, and complex economic strangulation operation modern history has ever seen slowly corrode an empire from within, like a cancer? Tonight, we won't be looking at boring stock charts, interest rates, or complex military maps. Tonight, we won't listen to the noise of that decaying empire. We'll listen to the sound of its cracking backbone. And believe me, what you'll hear won't just surprise you. You'll also see how silent and deadly the collapse of a system can be, and you'll be terrified. If you're ready, let's walk through that door. To fully grasp this story, we first need to step away from the big picture, from the sterile geopolitical analyses experts discuss on television. We need to descend into the small capillaries where life flows, or no longer flows, into the countryside. I want to take you to the Tyumen region, to a place you'd struggle to find on a map, a forgotten place, the village of Ishma. You've probably never heard of it. Why would you? But if George Orwell were alive today and writing 1984, this is where he would find his inspiration. It is the place where the purest, most refined version of a dystopian war economy is being lived out. Close your eyes. Let's go there. It's quiet around you. But this isn't the peaceful silence of nature. It's the silence of abandonment, of a place where hope has been cut off. Then you hear a sound in the distance. It's not the sound of a modern vehicle. It's the coughing, wheezing, old, rusty, probably Soviet-era, exhaust-leaking engine noise of a pickup truck. Its wheels sink into and out of the mud. It struggles. The engine groans. Why? Because there is no asphalt on the roads. The asphalt was torn up years ago. Maybe it was stolen, maybe sold, maybe it just melted away and mixed into the soil from neglect. No one even remembers. But in the midst of that ruin, that gray sky, and that brown misery, there is one mechanism that works flawlessly, with endless energy, squeaking and creaking. The huge black speakers mounted on the back of the pickup truck. What do you hear from those speakers? A distorted, crackling, metallic sound. It echoes off the walls of the dilapidated wooden houses. The last sound is victory marches playing, joyful, enthusiastic, heroic marches. And in between, cutting through those joyful marches, a cold, emotionless announcement: die for the fatherland, join the army. Can you imagine? The sewage system isn't working. The roads are swamps. People are struggling to find food, but the state's only, most powerful, and most functional presence there is a loudspeaker ordering them to die, not to live. This truck, I think it's the most perfect, most crystallized summary of the current state of the Russian economy and the Putin regime. On one side, a rotting, gangrenous, immobile body. On the other, a mouth still shouting victory cries, completely detached from reality. And right at this point, a very important, very critical character enters this absurd scene. Do you know how Western media has described this character for years? The Kremlin's financial wizard, the genius keeping the Russian economy afloat. Elvira Nabiullina, governor of the Bank of Russia. Those who follow Nabiullina know she is like an ice queen. She is very controlled. She never shows her emotions. She chooses her words with the precision of a surgeon. She always speaks in that diplomatic, incomprehensible technical language. But recently, something changed. That mask cracked. Nabiullina set aside that technical language and made a terrible confession, perhaps the biggest and most dangerous of her career. She said, "It is now very difficult to predict the impact of the West's new sanctions." This sentence may seem simple to you. You might say, so what? She said, we're struggling. Number. In bureaucratic Russian, this means we are not in control. The steering wheel is locked, the brakes have failed, and we are heading full speed towards a concrete wall. And Nabiullina didn't just say that. She calmly announced to the Russian people and industrialists that this high-interest hell, this economic torture, would continue until the end of 2026, almost like a death sentence. Do you know how high she raised interest rates? To 21%. This is an astronomical figure. It means don't invest, don't spend money, just stand still. To help you visualize this, let me give you a very clear car metaphor. Let the Russian economy be a car, an old tired Lada. Vladimir Putin is at the wheel. His eyes are fixed not on the road, but on imaginary victories on the horizon, on maps of Ukraine. His foot is on the gas pedal. He's pushing it all the way down. He's flooring it. Trillions of rubles in war spending, soldier salaries, money pouring into tank factories. The engine is roaring. The rev counter is beyond red. The needle is at the end. The car is shaking. But right next to him, Elvira Nabiullina is sitting in the passenger seat. She sees the precipice ahead, and she too is pulling the handbrake with all her might, with both hands. She's pressing the brake with her feet, because she is trying to stop the monster called inflation, to cool down that overheated engine, that economy. What happens if you press the gas and the brake at the same time all the way down? The car doesn't move. It shakes where it stands. Smoke comes out of the wheels. And eventually, that engine can't withstand the pressure and explodes. And that's exactly what's happening in Russia right now, my friends. The engine has exploded. I'm not the proof of this. Neither are the Western propagandists. The proof came directly from Russian defense industry manager Alexei Chadayev. Chadayev admitted that the situation is so dire that it has become so impossible for companies to access credit and cash. Do you know what companies have started doing? Barter. Yes, you heard right. Barter in 2025. Companies are exchanging goods instead of money. You give me steel, I'll give you coal. You give me rubber, I'll give you milk. Just like those dark 1990s, which are like a traumatic wound in the memory of the Russian people, a period they want to forget. A superpower with nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles is reverting to medieval trade methods. They have reached a point where money has lost its meaning. But the story is not limited to this internal helplessness, this engine failure. The real suffocation, the real breathlessness is happening outside. We can call this the logistical strangulation operation. And it is unlike anything we have seen in modern warfare. This is not a siege with guns and cannons. It is an invisible wall woven with paperwork, prohibitions, and bureaucracy. Russia is not just becoming poorer. Russia is being physically cut off from the world. It is being turned into a deserted island surrounded by walls. I asked you to picture the map. Now look at the western border of that map, the Polish border. That border is no longer just a customs gate where you show your passport and pass through. It is now an impenetrable iron curtain. Our sources confirm that controls on the Polish side have reached a complete closure level. Not even a bird can fly across the border. Not even a single screw can pass. You may be thinking, so the Polish border is closed, so what? Russia is a huge country. Can it be self-sufficient? Can it make its own tractors? This is where the biggest misconception lies, and this is also Putin's biggest miscalculation. We need to understand this. Russian agriculture is no longer a Soviet legacy like in those nostalgic films. Russian agriculture has been completely rebuilt over the last 20 years with Western technology and Western integration. From seeds to medicine, this system is 70% dependent on the West, down to the smallest screw in those huge, air-conditioned, satellite-controlled tractors. What happened when the Western door closed? John Deere tractor spare parts didn't arrive. Those productive Dutch seeds didn't arrive. German pesticides didn't arrive. Now imagine Russia's vast, endless fields. Huge modern machines stand in the middle of the fields like abandoned statues. They don't move. Why? A simple electronic card has burned out, or a $10 gear has broken. But that part won't come. It's banned. Those modern machines are turning into huge, rusting piles of scrap because of the lack of parts. The fields cannot be planted. The soil is silent. There is no harvest. But for the Kremlin, the real shock came from where it least expected it. Not from the West. It came from its most trusted backyard. From Kazakhstan. Putin's most trusted ally, the regime he called brothers, quietly but fatally turned its back on Russia. Looking at Astana Times data, we see that the Kazakh government has imposed serious restrictions on Russian grain trade, transit, and the transport of Russian goods. Is this a betrayal? Yes, from the Kremlin's perspective, it is a betrayal of the great Eurasian Brotherhood. But in reality, it is a survival instinct. Kazakhstan does not want to be chained to Russia, a sinking ship. It fears the West's secondary sanctions, that economic stick. And it is suffocating Russia with bureaucratic obstacles. It is refusing payments. It is holding up trains. It says documents are missing, the system is broken, but it is not letting them through. And imagine thousands of trucks stuck at the border crossings. The drivers are waiting helplessly. What's in those trucks? Not luxury cars, perfumes, or electronics. They contain basic necessities for the Russian people. There's flour, oil, medicine, and that's why the cycle is complete. Let's go back to that Moscow market where the butter was stolen, which we mentioned at the beginning. Most of the market shelves are now empty. Do you know what happened to the remaining products, such as butter? They were locked up. Butter prices have increased by 25% since the beginning of the year, according to official figures, and by 40% in some regions. Think about it. Imagine for a moment that you are in that market. You go shopping for breakfast, and a basic food item, that simple yellow block you spread on your bread every morning, like a jewel, like a diamond ring, like an iPhone, it's sold in locked, transparent boxes. You have to call the attendant to get it. The box has to be opened with a key. This is not just inflation data. This is a social trauma. This is the most concrete, most humiliating way of telling a people, you are no longer a normal country, you are no longer safe. The numbers are cold, but the story they tell is heartbreaking. 24% of Russians, or nearly 1 in 4, openly admit with shame that they have had to cut back on food spending. Consumption of milk and dairy products has fallen from 249 kilograms per person per year to 165 kilograms. This is not a simple decline. It is a collapse. Do you know what this means? It means children in their developmental years cannot drink milk. It means their bones will not develop properly. It means a generation will be malnourished. And potatoes, you know the place of potatoes in Russian culture. Since Tolstoy, since Dostoevsky, potatoes have been sacred. They are not just a vegetable, they are soup, stew, bread. It is the friend of the poor, always there, reliable even in the hardest times. But last year, the price of potatoes rose by 64%. In some regions, it tripled. If even potatoes have become a luxury, if even potatoes have become unattainable, what will these people eat? Will they eat stones? And this is a spiral of scarcity. The shelves are emptying, prices are skyrocketing, people are scared, they are stockpiling, prices are rising even more, and families are eating less to survive. Just like those dark days of the 90s when Vladimir Putin said, "I saved you," those days are over. Putin built his 20-year rule on a single promise: stability. I saved you from the chaos, the queues, the misery of the 90s. And today, because of this special operation, he himself started and continues for his own ego. He is pushing his people back into the nightmare they hated, the nightmare they tried to forget with his own hands. And here's another very ironic, infuriating situation. Russia is an agricultural powerhouse, right? One of the world's largest grain producers. It must have huge reserves. Yes, it does. The warehouses are full. So where are these reserves? What is happening to them? Why aren't they turning into cheap bread for the people? This is the little discussed dark side of Russia's food crisis. Instead of opening those reserves to lower prices and alleviate shortages during these difficult times, the government is keeping them locked away. Allegedly, much of the grain is still rotting in storage, or worse. And I think this is the worst part. Some of it is being saved for export deals to sell abroad and find hot money, to find the foreign currency to finance the war. So, while its own people can't get bread, while its own children can't drink milk, the state is calculating how to sell that grain abroad. On paper, this may help Russia's economy. They can say in their statistics, our exports have increased. But it's of no use to the father who struggles to bring bread home in the evening. Statistics don't fill stomachs. Logistics, fuel, labor, they're all interconnected, a giant vortex pulling everything down at the war industry, that insatiable monster. It sucked up all the resources in the civilian sector, all the money, and most importantly, all the skilled people like a black hole. Putin took more than 300,000 skilled men from the fields, factories, behind the wheel, and construction sites, and sent them to the front lines, to the trenches, to the embrace of death. Due to the devaluation of the ruble and increasing police pressure, Central Asian migrant workers also fled the country. The result? A massive labor shortage in Russia. There is a shortage of more than 200,000 workers in agriculture alone. So, there are no men to plow the fields. Even if there were tractors, there are no drivers to operate them. There are no hands to harvest the crops. The produce remains in the fields. Fuel prices have skyrocketed. Diesel, indispensable for agriculture and transportation, is prohibitively expensive. Why aren't the refineries working? Because there is no equipment. What's more, Ukrainian drones strike those refineries and fuel depots every night. The railway network, Russia's lifeline, it too is rapidly deteriorating and becoming congested. Trains are delayed, canceled. Why? Because the priority is always the front. Tanks, bullets, missiles going to the front are more important than food, flour, milk going to cities. Food wagons are waiting on sidings for days, weeks. Their contents are rotting. The result of all this is the terrible, chaotic picture we see today. Let's put all these pieces together. The man hiding butter in his coat. Those waiting for frozen meat on diamonds, the exploding engine and the empty fields, the silent factories. The picture before us is clear enough to leave no room for doubt. The Russian Federation is paying for its claim to be a military superpower with civil bankruptcy and the hunger of its people. The strategists and generals sitting at those long tables in the Kremlin are not paying the price of this war. This bill is being paid by the man in the market trembling as he hides the butter. This bill is being paid by the mother who cannot buy milk for her child. No matter how loudly that rusty propaganda truck in Tyumen shouts, no matter how much it screams fatherland, no matter how hard Vladimir Putin presses that gas pedal, Elvira Nabiullina's desperate panic brake and the people's empty refrigerators blew up that engine. When historians talk about the collapse of the Soviet Union, they often make a very important observation. They say, American missiles did not destroy the Soviet Union. NATO tanks did not destroy it. The Soviets were destroyed by empty supermarket shelves and the despair of the people. And it seems that history is repeating itself in 2025 in a much more ruthless, much faster, much more tragic way. There is a famous, very old metaphor in Russian politics, the battle of the refrigerator and the television. The television spreads propaganda. It says everything is wonderful. It says we are strong. It says they envy us. It plays victory marches. It is colorful and loud. The refrigerator, however, the refrigerator is honest, it is cold, and it is silent. It only shows the truth, that emptiness. For years, television was winning in Russia. People looked at the screen and imagined their stomachs were full. But today, towards the end of 2025, in Russia, the refrigerator knocked out the television. Hunger defeated fear. Reality defeated propaganda. The question that needs to be asked now is no longer, can Russia win the war in Ukraine? Believe me, that question has lost its meaning. Whatever happens on the battlefield, the rear has fallen. The real crucial question is this: the Russian people, with the world's most valuable diamonds, gold, and natural gas lying beneath their feet, how much longer will they accept standing in line to search for a piece of frozen meat in the mud? The anger building up in those lines, that silence, when will it turn into a scream and crash against the thick, deaf walls of the Kremlin? I want to leave you tonight with this thought. An empire can be shaken by blows from outside, by missiles, by armies. But the real collapse begins the moment a father, sitting at the kitchen table, looks into his child's eyes and cannot explain why he cannot afford a simple stick of butter. The legitimacy of the state ends with that empty plate. We will continue to closely follow this collapse the moment the engine explodes, and the approaching great inevitable social storm. Keep your eyes on those supermarket shelves. Stay with us to see the truth. And I can't help but ask, do you think hunger can overcome fear? Or will the Russian people silently watch their own collapse as if it were fate? Time will tell. But the clock is ticking much faster now. Thank you for watching and listening. Good night.